Hello and welcome to episode 108 of Tom's Hardware, the podcast, and it's November 22nd, 2022. Already, it's nearly Christmas. That's scary. I'm your host, Les Pounder, Associate Editor, and with me as always is Raspberry Pi expert, Ash Hill. And today we have a returning guest, a very special guest, Dmytro. He's back and he's got another project, which is just fantastic. He's also brought another project, which we all like. It's a bit quackers, but we like it. So, Dmytro, it's great to have you back. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and talk about your project?
Oh, definitely. First and foremost, thank you guys for, having me again. I mean, it's a pleasure being here again. And I hope that we are in for a sort of a half an hour of lovely time. We'll discuss different projects and, the one that you, of course, reached out to me about and some other things. Yeah, so my official name is Dmytro Panin, but of course, I mean, friends call me Dima, so thank you for doing that. It's sort of, it means a lot, definitely. I live in Ukraine, Kyiv, Ukraine. Have been living here for, or at least in Ukraine, my entire life. Originally, I'm from the eastern part of Ukraine, but have been living here in the capital for the past 10 years now, I suppose. My entire life I've been sort of connected with computers and things like that. I've been always a tech head. I started programming when I was 8 years of age and have never stopped since. At the moment, or for the past few years, I'm not working as a software developer or software architect. I'm doing something else, but still in the IT field. I'm being a part of delivery part of the organization, but still like to tinker. I love building new things. I mean, I think these days people like myself, like us, we call makers, right, or tinkerers, something like that. I mean, I love coding. I love putting things together. Love soldering. Things like that. Not sure what else to say, to be honest. But yeah, that's me. Yeah.
That's a great introduction. I like that. Thank you very much. I mean, you're right. You know, we are makers, we are tinkerers. We enjoy, building things and taking things apart and learning. And you're epitomizing that with all these projects you're creating. I mean, I think this is your third or fourth project this year.
Right. I think there were definitely more projects. So the thing is, with these little projects, is that I build them since I need something. Sometimes the idea behind the project itself can be a bit bonkers. It can be a bit silly, as with the Guardian duck, the one that you actually mentioned, of course. I mean, or the quacker. But yeah, there still was a problem, and they wanted it to be solved. For me, this is definitely just a hobby. But what I do love about these things is not only that I build them, but I like to open source them afterwards. Mm-hmm. So I put them onto my GitHub, all of the source code, all of the ways how you can connect all of those systems with the bill of materials, like with BRM of some sorts. Try to make that visual so people can do the same thing, so they can repeat these little projects. That's what I like doing. Yes, that's one of the things. So this is a hobby, but the one that I spend a lot of free time whenever I get that, whenever I want to be distracted, or whenever I want to resolve a problem that I might have in my life. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into that that duck, because I think we should start out on a good lighthearted note. Yeah,
the duck. Yes, definitely. Let's start from that. So I do have 2 cameras today for you to showcase the duck, or not only the duck, but all of the things from 2 perspectives. Sort of. It is from here, as you can tell, there are some other projects lying around that we'll dive into. But this is the duck. The duck itself is quite simplistic. And the project itself, let me put it on this camera so I can show it here as well. So originally, the idea was that I didn't want, on my household, people were stealing cookies. I mean, a silly idea, but I want to be notified when someone is stealing a cookie. So what we've got here is a Raspberry Pi-based project. So the model itself, I didn't design this one. This one was a remix, repurposed. I found it in a Thingiverse. Great thing. But what we've got inside, let me try and crack that open for you. It's not pretty on the inside for certain, but it's based on Raspberry Pi Pico. and it quacks at people. So that's the idea. There is a motion sensor here that if you, turn it on, and let me try and do just that. It just quacked over there, as you might have heard. I'm not sure if you could have heard that, but then it will repeat quacking at you every 30 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. And so whenever somebody is passing, I actually put it next to a cookie jar, and then whenever someone tried to steal a cookie, it would quack at them, and I would definitely be notified. There was a problem that with that things I want, of course, it to be rechargeable, and the battery itself there is, I think, 1,000 micro ampere hours. So what I built into it is a Qi charger, as you can probably tell. So you can put it on a wireless charger, and that's what I also had next to a cookie jar. So I put it there. It would charge itself. Well, I could have replaced it if the cookie jar was somewhere else, so to speak. And so a neat little project. Once again, I open sourced all of the code, all of the parts. It's on GitHub, it's on Twitter, I guess, as well. And there you go. Just a little quacker. Yeah, the guardian duck, that's what I called it.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Has it impacted household cookie consumption?
Yeah, I mean, people were actually excited about the fact that it quacked at them.
And they go in for more?
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it helped at all, but it was a lot of fun. Then again, after about a day or so, it quacking at you, you can get pretty much annoyed by that. And you try to make it somehow stop. And things, originally, as you see here now, it can, pretty much it can be opened freely. But then actually, there were some neodymium magnets. So silence. It still quacks. We need to turn it off, I think. Otherwise, actually during nights when it was quacking every now and again, I think these motion sensors, they can be triggered by whatever. They're usually triggered by people, but every now and again there's a false alarm, so to speak. And whenever you're sleeping and this thing starts to quack at something, it's a bit unsettling, a bit uncanny.
Phantom quacks.
Right. I mean, this is something that you need to put into the GitHub description. Quantum quacks are still a thing, but yeah. So little ducky here.
I love it. I love that you put wireless power to it as well. Because normally we just get a USB power bank connected up and that's it. We're done. But you've integrated it onto one neat little unit, and that's just amazing what you can do with the kit that you can get off the shelf these days.
Exactly. I mean, these things, these Qi chargers, as they called, they are marketed towards older cell phones. The ones, let me try and change the camera here. So they are targeted at the older phones that do not have a wireless charging capabilities. Then you can pretty much just connect it through micro USB, or there are also lighting cables. And that is it. But I mean, fortunately for us, Raspberry Pi Pico can be powered by, not even powered by, charged in this case, by a regular micro USB. And therefore, I actually love the fact that you can slot or put things together, that they're modular. I love soldering things, but with those, if you solder them together, it is kind of hard to repurpose things if you wanted to. But with things like that, you just plug and play. And if you needed it for something else later, you can just repurpose it.
That is awesome. I mean, this is just one of many awesome projects that you've given us this year. I mean, the one that comes to mind straight away is the Airstrikes system that you had, where it posted data online. That was timely and amazing, and also necessary, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was. It still is. It is actually here. It sort of works. The idea behind this project was, of course, the fact that it's not only the device itself, but I also developed a series of widgets for all of the operating systems, macOS, Linux, and Android. So people can install them and follow what is happening if they, for whatever reason, can't hear the air siren. Is that there's also a website that is sort of put together, but that was not the goal. I just put it together for the fact that I had the domain name, and so I needed to an API to be put there. But that's and indeed, I mean, unfortunately, it is needed. People use that still, and there are some contributors who are contributing with the fact that it will improve in backend and sometimes front end. So yeah, that thing still underworks. It still works, and it is still needed. Yeah, things air raid strikes are still a thing. Of course, you know that we already discussed that briefly before the show.
Yeah. I mean, how you've implemented it as well is fantastic. Because I use the API when the Pico W came out the week before. I had an ESP32. It was just about the size of my thumbnail. I haven't got it to hand, unfortunately, but literally, the size of your thumbnail, and it had an integrated 5x5 NeoPixel. I just used your API, got a location I set myself as Kyiv, and whenever there was an airstrike call, it would flash red to say something was happening. It was just so simple to do. So thank you very much for that.
Right. I mean, you're more than welcome. I mean, it's great that you actually, sharing that. It's great that people can reuse that. Obviously, it is more, sort of needed for people in the country. But for the fact that you sort of put that thing together and, of course, showcase that, it means that even more people, more developers can reuse that, build it into their own projects. I've got some developers who actually repurposed that API and build a plugin for the Magic Mirror. Magic Mirror, I think there's I'm not quite familiar with Magic Mirrors as a whole. I never built one, but there is this framework-ish thing called Magic Mirror as well.
Yeah.
And then there's this person that they just implement a plugin for that, and yeah, they use it, which is great. I mean, I definitely endorse that. I adore that for the fact that it is needed for people.
So you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that necessity tends to drive a lot of your projects, and living in Ukraine, there are some interesting, I guess it puts you in an interesting place. So I wanted to know more about another project you've created related to that, your Geiger project. What can you tell us about?
The Geiger counter. Right. Let me try and put it here as well, just for showcase it a bit. I confess, this is one of those projects where I actually didn't even bother to create a case for it, because it, never meant to be something that would be front and center of not a piece to showcase, so to speak, but it was mainly to try and understand what the radiation level is just outside things. There are all sort of threats, as you know, these days, and therefore, if something were to happen, it would be great to know that, and also, of course, to inform people about that. Therefore, I had the idea of this little API. So what we've got here is a three-piece. So we have got this Geiger counter as a module. This module uses this M4011 Geiger tube. And the idea is that there's a thing called CPM, or counts per minute. And that's pretty much how it works. I mean, actually, Geiger counters are way easy, or way simpler than we sort of imagine. There's the high voltage flowing through this tube. And whenever a particle goes through it, this circuit here, it sort of connects, or there's a short circuit, if you will, and there's a click each and every time a particle comes to that. So what Raspberry Pi Pico here is doing is pretty much listening for this counts, for this for the amount of, or the number of times this tube has given a pulse. There's a formula for this particular tube that Raspberry Pi Pico is pretty much calculating, and it displays it here on this display just for me. It is not connected because it's 400 volts, so I didn't really want to have it connected at the moment.
No, not really.
As you may imagine. Usually it just sits on next to my window in a box, because once again, one of the reasons why I use Raspberry Pi Pico W here is that it can post this data. Firstly, it posted it into my little server there, but then I made that little public API. And indeed, it's just a little public API to know how things are. This thing is not very accurate, but still it works. It works. And yeah, that's what it is. In order to develop that, I actually approach it slightly differently. I've never done that before with the Raspberry Pi Pico. Whenever I develop a project, I usually use, well, one of three. It's either C++, well, as a Raspberry Pi SDK, C, C++, with Make and whatnot. Sometimes I use MicroPython, sometimes I use CircuitPython. All of them are great. For this time, or for this build, for the first time, I tried and use Arduino IDE for Raspberry Pi Pico. I just wanted to try that out. And it's C++, again, just in Arduino style. And there's a board, there's a core, I think they're called cores, for Raspberry Pi Pico. And it worked flawlessly. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Works quite well. There were a few challenges, though. This board, it comes, not board, but this Geiger counter, it came with a sort of a driver or some implementation. I had to rewrite that, or well, write one from scratch, because unfortunately that one didn't work quite well, if I put it mildly. But at the end of the day, it was an important project just to understand, once again, whenever there is a nuclear threat, or whenever there is a power plant or a nuclear power plant that has been threatened, let us put it like this. We just want to know what is happening.
Yeah.
Was that Geiger module hard to come by?
I tell you that there was a shortage of Geiger counters, so it was hard to come by them at first. Then they sort of reappeared. Apparently, of course, the suppliers, they realized that people needed that. Usually, it wasn't really concerning the models for makers, right? I mean, it was predominantly about the Geiger counters, a bit more, not sure what they're called, but the ones that you can pretty much carry with you in your pocket and then see how much radioactive ionization you were exposed to, something like that. With this one, they were unavailable for some time. Then I got come by one. They were a bit more on the expensive side. But I still wanted to build something with that. I wanted, well, for myself and, of course, for the people who were to use that API to see how things are. Must confess, these days, the API is not updated regularly, or the data on the API is not updated regularly. I do not keep it plugged in due to the rolling blackouts, emergency blackouts. Therefore, I update data every now and again whenever I plug it in. So that's how it works. And with the fact that there are these rolling blackouts, it actually forced me to try and find some other approaches to the projects. And this is still a work in progress. It's not yet a project, but one of the things that I started doing is that this is a project that I was working on. It's a Raspberry Pi Zero, as you can tell. But it's with the WaveShare UPS module, right? The idea there is that it's plugged in and it works as a little server. But then whenever there's a power cut, there's still enough juice to power my project for another 5 hours, give or take. And I sort of try and build new projects with this feature. Well, if it's needed to be operational during one of the blackouts, which of course there are many. There are other projects that I can and probably will showcase today with regards to how we're dealing with blackouts. But this is just something that I realized that some of the new projects that I'm planning or thinking about, they involve batteries, not in order to be carried around, but just for the fact that there is a blackout and they still need it to work. There is no internet, but then it could probably work with some of the other radio models, or just use LTE, if that works, because that's a whole different story. Yeah.
That is very cool. Like very cool. So all the data that's collected by the Geiger counter, that's in an API. Is that API stored somewhere? So you can look back at data from weeks ago, perhaps?
After building this project, or well, during the time that I was building that, I realized that there are other projects similar to that. They actually combine not API, but Geiger counted data from multiple sources, and they try to expose that. So, and therefore you can pretty much have a sort of a time machine there on services like that. The one that I've built here was never meant to be a big project or something of, importance, let me put it like this, because once again, this is not a sterile environment that I've got here. I live in the center of Kiev, so I have only one Geiger counter tube. It hasn't been properly calibrated. It has been calibrated factory, so to speak, but then I haven't never recalibrated it. So I can't say for certain that the data that I've got here is accurate. But it is close enough if something were to happen, then you can see the spike. And one of the, again, reasons is that you never know where the data is coming from, right? I mean, you can look at some other APIs and probably you can trust some people, definitely. In my case, I just wanted to see the data myself, the one that I've collected. And I'd never meant to actually make it a publicly available thing. But then a friend of mine said that, hey, it might be interesting for some people because, well, sort of they know you, they know that you build these projects. This is not the first project that you sort of made available. So just put it out there. I mean, if people don't like it, you just, can put it down. It doesn't really matter, right? It's just a small little thing that we can all look at whenever we need. So there's no front end whatsoever. There's just a little API that is, and the number that is updated at first it was every few hours. Now it's once a day, once every 2 days, something like that. So anyway, I just keep it plugged in. Yeah.
That's very cool and very necessary at the moment as well. But something more necessary for you, I do believe, is another project you've got, which is to do with blackouts. And we've briefly touched on this, but you've tried to predict blackouts. Is that right?
That is true. That is true. That is, again, I mean, I think everyone knows that these days there are blackouts across Ukraine. And they're, of course, caused by the shelling, by the fact that the Russians, they are shelling our power plants, power facilities, gas facilities, and whatnot. And therefore, in order to sustain and to keep the system running, the governments, not the government itself, but the energy companies, they are rationing electricity. So, aka rolling blackouts. There's actually two types of blackouts, and that's as far as I know, not everyone knows that, but they are rolling blackouts and emergency blackouts, and those are two different things. So for the rolling blackouts, we have got schedule. It is publicly available. Everyone can look at that. It works for some people better than the others. So for me, it doesn't work, unfortunately. So the place where I live, I'm not sure why again, but it doesn't work. I have regular power blackouts, power cutouts, but they do not really correspond with the schedule. So if you were to juxtapose these two things, the blackouts and the schedule, there's no match whatsoever. And they're emergency blackouts. So whenever there's a spike in the usage of the electricity, some neighborhoods or some cities can be just can be cut off power, or whenever there's an attack, of course. So with that in mind, I realized that I can't really understand where I can prepare food, because once again, power is important for preparing food, for running water, for the central heating, for cellular connection, for LTE and whatnot. So this is, of course, something that we all take for granted and we don't really think about that. But that's all interconnected. So to keep on top of things, to try and realize how to sort of schedule at least the short, to try and not plan ahead. I'm trying to find proper words here, but just try and put some order to this madness. I built this little project, and this is a blackout logger. So what it does, and actually you can see here, so what I'm doing here, I'm actually covering some of the logs, and that is on purpose because this information can be sensitive. So I will definitely show a couple of log entries, but I will not be showing all of the ones that are happening because this information can be used in whatever means. But what the project does, it is staying connected in the socket and it doesn't drain any power whatsoever. I just made this rough calculations, and that if I leave it in plugged for like for a year, it is the same as if I just boiled my electrical kettle. So it doesn't really matter. So what it does, it tracks when it was switched on or switched off, and log in that. So the power log, and whenever I can come in home, I can look at that. So whenever there is electricity, I look when the electricity was given back, so to speak. So when to expect the next power cut. If the electricity was just returned to us, to our home, that I can expect at least a few hours of power, so to speak, and therefore I can track it here. Or on the other hand, if I come back home and I see there is no electricity, as you can see, it's an e-ink display, and I see when the last time this little device was online, was receiving power.
Yeah.
With that, I can try and deduce how much, no, not deduce, but calculate how much time has left since when the power was cut. And for instance, if power was cut only like 15 minutes ago, then I do not expect power for another few hours, right? But if I realize that the power was gone for 3 to 4 hours, then I can plan ahead, and I can start preparations for the fact that there is going to be power, and I can prepare, cook some food, and I don't need to use any those that you sort of can eat cold and stuff like that. So yeah, that is how it is used by my household. Again, it has when it was turned on, when it was last online, and all of the logs. So you can also see how many times the electricity was cut today. And based on that, I can try again and deduce whether the power is going to be absent anytime soon. So yeah, a little project like that. It's just a Raspberry Pi Pico with an RTC module in it. I can try and open it.
What sort of display is it using?
It uses a 3.7-inch wave-share e-ink display.
Oh, good.
And it's actually the same display that I've got for my little sun geyser. This is the same display, and I usually, whenever I develop a project like this one, I usually have, 2 of everything. I've got 2 displays. I've got more than 2 Raspberry Pis, Pico, obviously, but I've got 2 the same, 2 RTC models and whatnot. So I use one for development and one for production, so to speak. Yeah. That, of course, the experience of being a software developer for many, many years, I think, speaks in me here. But yeah, and therefore, whenever I needed this device, I already had all the components. So I just took them off the shelf. I already had another 3D printed shell here, so I was able just to put everything together. And I just needed to write some. Was it MicroPython? Yes, it's in MicroPython. I just had to write some MicroPython code, and and it just sort of works. Yeah.
Slick.
It's very
surprised cool. It's not an orange case.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it has been already. In my case, pardon the pun, has already been printed out. So I could have created another one, sure. But yeah, I just went ahead with the one that I already had on hand. So yeah.
Awesome.
And of course, I mean, this is the project of necessity. Mm-hmm. But there was another one like that just a few months ago. It is not as important, so to speak. But now, every now and again, whenever the war has sort of separated the family. So part of my family is now living in the western part of the country. I live here in the center. Some part of my family is living in the east. So and I'm visiting rather frequently visiting my family in the western part of the country. So whenever I go there and do something with them, and I want to have some time off, so to speak, or maybe play a little video game, there was this problem that I realized that I couldn't really try and tune my MacBook. So I'm speaking to you through a MacBook M1. That is, it's not suitable for games, is it? I mean, it's a rather, I mean, you know what I mean. I mean, first of all, it's a Mac, right? And then if you don't have anything else there, you try and adapt things. So there are things like crossover and whatnot. But then when I tried and fine-tune games, I realized that I'm lacking a sort of thing that would be showing the stats, how it's going. So I developed this little project. Let me try and get rid of these. Since I had it is. I think I've got an addiction. Since pretty much everywhere I go, I have a Raspberry Pi on me of some sort. It's usually a zero or a Pico of some kind.
There is no cure.
There is none. I've actually owned the first Raspberry Pi I've got, and this is the first model they made available. But that's a completely different story, I suppose. I still cherish that. I mean, it's a prize. It's a prize. But
so, which model is it?
So it is. I think it's there. Some. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Just a second. Sorry. So this is a Raspberry Pi Model B. Yes, which is the first one they sort of publicly released. I think this one has got 256 megs of RAM.
Ooh,
if
that is
I'm
an
not
early
mistaken.
one. Yeah.
This is the first one that got, publicly available again. There's before Raspberry Pis, whenever you wanted to do something like that, you had to, once again, what I was doing is that you would buy a router, what was it called? It's by D-Link, I think, Dear 320. Yes, and that's the one that you could pretty much tap into. You can solder into the USB ports, and you can install something like a Linux kernel, like OpenWRT, I think.
Yeah,
and you can, yes, and you can pretty much build this, similar projects. Once again, the amount of RAM was laughable. It's 4 or 5 megs, don't quite remember. The same with what SSD in that case, but there was some storage. So when this thing was released, I was ecstatic. So I was, I think, one of the early birds, so to speak, and I was so happy to get my hands on that. So yeah, there's still no Wi-Fi, no wireless connectivity. There's this dongle though, an Asus Wi-Fi dongle that I still use. But yeah, what a device it was, and still is actually. Every now and again, I would power it up and use it for some thing that I need just for quick, but I don't really want to get it burned. So yeah, so it's there, not collecting dust. I look at it every now and again. So.
Oh, awesome! That's lovely. Sorry, I segued.
No, definitely.
So please carry on. Sorry.
Definitely. I mean, that is what I like actually discussing with you guys whenever you are covering some of the devices that I make, or inviting to this podcast, is that we can discuss and go down this memory lane, or something new. So no, definitely, please, whenever there's something and there's a detour, why not? I'm all in for that. Yeah, getting back to this little device. This is a device that shows you stats of your computer. At the moment, it is actually connected to my MacBook. What it shows there is the CPU used. As you see now, it's at 4% CPU. I'll probably use the other camera, since I think that you can't really read it that well. But what you've got here is CPU, GPU, RAM, and then there's SSD. There's network, and there's a network usage and temperature of the CPU, or in my case, SoC. And let me put it here, I think. It is a slightly strange, it's not a case, but it's an inbuilt thing that I've sort of came up with. This thing can be mounted to your laptop, to the side of a MacBook. And actually, I've got another MacBook here, and I can showcase it. Let me just, but I'll have to disconnect it, though, in order to showcase that. But yeah, so what you do is that this is the device here. There's always a magnet in the lid of your laptop. That is usually used for understanding how the lid is closed.
Yeah.
It's there. It stays there. So it's sort of a secondary monitor, if you will, rather small one, that just shows you the stats. So that's how it works. It's always connected. There's this LED here to actually signal whenever you are on a call. So your people at your place, they know that you do not want to be disturbed, so to speak. In my case, I think the the server side, let's say the server, the laptop side of things. It was just tracking whether Teams or any other programs were active and whether the microphone was used, something like that. And yeah, then it lights this thing up. It shows you all of the stats that you need, and yeah, that's how this little device worked. And I mean, you could just put it on the table or connect it here to your laptop. I also just changed a bit the server side for this thing, and it was monitoring one of my Raspberry Pi servers. So one Raspberry Pi was monitoring another. That's excessive, yeah, but it's already built, and the server side is built in Python. Therefore, just ran it on Raspberry Pi. Change a few lines as to how you track temperature of your SoC, and yeah, Bob's your uncle. It just worked. But yeah, this is
awesome.
Just a little device here.
It's absolutely awesome. I mean, every project you've shown tonight, I mean, it's been made for necessity, but it's also awesome, and you're sharing the details with people online. I mean, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Right. So in my case, all of the projects that I make are on GitHub. I think we can share a link right to the GitHub there, but I share everything there. I try to keep up everything as detailed as possible with all of the diagrams and whatnot. I'm also on Twitter, so all of the new projects I post there. I'm also on Reddit. That's actually just the three platforms that I use. I use GitHub, I use Twitter, and I use Reddit. And whenever some things I need necessary and built out of necessity. Some are not, as in, some of this BOB or Bob, as you might remember, is just a big orange button that's the name of the project. Some of them are not out of necessity, but still what I do is that I definitely describe how they work. I describe how one can be built. A lot of projects, they involve 3D printing, so I also share all of the STL files. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
And I try to reuse things. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. We have to reuse these projects. I mean, I've built projects in the past. I've taken them apart and become new projects. It's typically robots that I'll take apart, because robot parts, I don't want to have, I have got quite a lot of wheels for robots. They're in a box behind me. I think about 24, so about 24, something like that. They take up space. That's a lot of space. I don't need all them wheels. I should really get away. I haven't got 12 robots that are built, or whatever factor I want to have the number of wheels divided by how many wheels I've got.
You just need one robot with way too many wheels.
A 24-wheeled robot.
Yeah, why not?
I mean that's excessive, but I mean, why not? Indeed, I mean
that's the spirit of Pi.
I've done one with 8 wheels. That was a kit. It was supposed to look like the Mars rover. I've just given it to a school. In fact, they're playing with it now.
Aww.
And it had 8 wheels. Each wheel had its own motor. So there's 8 motors, very low torque, micro gear metal motors, all controlled from a micro bit. So a really, not a powerful microcontroller. It's even less powerful than a Raspberry Pi Pico, really. And it was able to do the sensors and control all these motors and drive around my dining room, my office, as I call it.
Right.
And climb over boxes of stuff and crash quite a lot because I didn't program it right. But it was fun. But yeah,
exactly.
We reuse all these parts and we make great projects. And what you're doing is fantastic, sir. So hats off to you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for saying that. Yeah, for certain. I mean, I try to reuse parts, try to reuse the code, again, try to share it with people. Some people are just getting to the coding, or some people just want to build things. They probably not have a lot of time to come up with something, but then they can just follow some of the things that I share. And yeah, it's just lovely. I love doing this. Yeah.
I respect the number of projects you have that you've left in production and haven't taken apart, because like Liz was saying, so many things get disassembled, very few stay where they're supposed to. Like there are 2 Picos here, and they're probably going to stay there, and that might be one of the and my Picade. That's like one of the few Raspberry Pi projects that I haven't just taken apart after I put it together.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, truth be told, I mean, whenever I use them, I do not take them apart. Something that I probably haven't mentioned, but even the camera that you showed, the camera that shows this view with some of these keyboards and whatnot, it is actually a Raspberry Pi. It's a Raspberry Pi project. Let me try and take it apart, and I can show it to you in there. So sorry for the noise, if that's still the case.
Your house could just be a Pi museum of cool projects.
So it is a Raspberry Pi Zero, and this is a high quality, whatever it's called, a high quality camera, I think. And I put it together when the Corona has started and everyone started working from home. I wanted to have a better camera just for the conferences, for video calls. You couldn't buy a webcam. Everyone needed one, and but I already had Raspberry Pi Zeros, and I was able to order these modules. So I put one together and started using it as sometimes a webcam, sometimes like a time-lapse thing to see how plants grow. So yeah, it has been reused for multiple projects, but I mainly use it as a webcam or as something when I need an additional view. So yeah, I mean, Raspberry Pis are pretty much a part of my life, I think.
It's evident, yeah. I've got the same camera setup as well, but I use it for a microscope. So I want to take close-up pictures of circuit boards.
That's amazing. Do send me a link.
It's exactly the same thing. It's a Pimoroni, a microscope stand kit that I got about 2 years ago. Uses HQ camera, has a microscope lens on it, and easy peasy. And you even get a stand with it as well. The stand is currently powering this setup, so I can have my light and the camera and the microphone all in one place. So it's multi-purpose. But you can get some fantastic quality pictures from the microscope lens that comes in that kit. I think I got down to I haven't got a Pi to hand, strangely, today. So I use a Pico. I was getting right down to the chip level, so surface mount components. And it was clear, really clear. So I was massively impressed with that. But
that's lovely.
The HQ camera, I remember... Go on, Dima.
No, please. I mean, I think the thing is that still there's a bit of a lag. But yeah, what I wanted to say is that, I mean, a microscope, and the one that you can pretty much connect a camera to, is on my bucket list. Not the first priority, but I'm probably going to get inspired by you.
You're the first person to say that. Thank you. Well, this is where we draw to a close tonight, I'm afraid. So we're going to sign off for today. We'll be back next week at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern and 7 p.m. GMT in the UK, with another guest. And thank you to Dima for being on the show once again. No doubt you're going to be back with another project because you never stop making projects.
Definitely. I mean, it was, again, a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, just drop me a line. I'll be here.
Will do. Thank you very much. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you very much. See you later.